I still remember the moment I realized something wasn't right, and it wasn't during the chaos, the deadlines, or the constant pressure. It came after everything went quiet. At the time, I thought I had finally done the brave thing. I had made a decision that people around me admired, one that sounded healthy, responsible, and even inspiring. From the outside, it looked like I had chosen peace. What no one warned me about was what that peace would actually feel like, or how heavy it could become when there was nothing left to distract me from myself. Before any of this happened, my life looked completely normal. I had a steady job, a routine, responsibilities, and a sense that I was doing what I was supposed to do. I woke up early, commuted, answered emails, attended meetings, and checked items off my list. On paper, everything made sense. I wasn't failing. I wasn't struggling financially. I wasn't falling apart in a way anyone could see. And maybe that's why it took me so long to realize something was wrong. There was no obvious crisis to point to, no dramatic breakdown that demanded attention, just a quiet erosion happening in the background. Slowly, almost invisibly, something began to wear me down. It wasn't a single bad day or a specific incident. It was the accumulation of small moments. The constant pressure to perform. The feeling that my value was tied to productivity. The sense that my days were being spent maintaining a life rather than actually living one. I felt like I was always preparing for something. The next meeting, the next deadline, the next obligation, but never arriving anywhere. I told myself it was just stress. Everyone feels this way, I thought. This is adulthood. This is responsibility. Once I get a break, once things slow down, I'll feel like myself again. At first, the pressure didn't feel dramatic. It was subtle, almost easy to ignore. Days blended into each other, filled with messages, notifications, and expectations that demanded attention but offered very little meaning in return. I was always tired, but not in a way that felt justified. I wasn't sick. I wasn't overwhelmed enough to stop. So I kept going. I functioned. I showed up. I did what was expected of me. Yet beneath all of that, there was a constant tightness in my chest, a feeling that I was always behind even when I wasn't. Rest didn't feel restorative anymore. Weekends disappeared before I felt like I'd recovered from the week before. Small things started to irritate me. I had less patience for people I genuinely cared about. Conversations felt like chores. I caught myself zoning out during moments that should have mattered. Even things I used to enjoy felt muted, like I was experiencing life through a layer of glass. The more uncomfortable I felt, the more I relied on staying busy to avoid thinking about it. If I kept moving, I didn't have to ask myself hard questions. I didn't call it unhappiness. I called it being responsible. I called it adulthood. I called it doing what needed to be done. Eventually, the idea of change stopped feeling like an option and started feeling like a solution. I didn't wake up one day and impulsively walk away. I thought about it for a long time. I weighed the pros and cons. I had long internal debates about timing, money, and practicality. I convinced myself that stepping back was the mature thing to do, that choosing space and simplicity meant choosing health. I told myself I wasn't quitting because I couldn't handle it. I was quitting because I wanted something better, something more sustainable, something that would finally allow me to breathe. I imagined what life would look like without constant demands. Quieter mornings, slower days, fewer obligations, time to think clearly, time to reconnect with myself. I pictured calm routines, meaningful reflection, and the freedom to figure out what I actually wanted. The decision felt logical, almost inevitable. When I finally made it, there was a rush of relief. People praised my courage. They told me I was brave for choosing myself. I believed them. I felt lighter, as if I had finally escaped something that had been draining me for years. For a brief moment, it seemed like everything was going exactly as planned. The first days felt almost unreal. I woke up without an alarm. I noticed things I hadn't paid attention to in years. Sunlight through the window. The quiet of a morning without urgency. I cleaned. I organized. I fixed small things I had ignored for too long. I went outside during the day and felt like I was breaking some invisible rule. My body relaxed. My sleep improved. I told myself this was what healing felt like. I told myself I had made the right choice. But that feeling didn't last. Once the novelty wore off, the silence began to change. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. Without deadlines or external pressure, time stretched in uncomfortable ways. Days lost their structure. Mornings blended into afternoons, afternoons into evenings. I struggled to find meaning in routines that were supposed to feel restorative. I tried to be intentional about my time. I created habits. I told myself I just needed to rest properly. But instead of peace, I felt restless. Instead of clarity, I felt exposed. The absence of noise made my thoughts louder, sharper, more persistent. Doubt crept in quietly, without announcing itself. I started questioning my decision, then questioning myself. I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I had misunderstood what was wrong in the first place. The life I had imagined didn't feel freeing anymore. It felt hollow. The quiet wasn't comforting. It was confronting. And that's when I began to realize something I hadn't expected at all. The structure I had resented had also been holding me together. Work hadn't just been exhausting me. It had been distracting me. It gave my days shape. It gave me an identity. It gave me a reason not to sit still long enough to feel what was underneath the exhaustion. Without it, everything I had buried surfaced. Old insecurities, unresolved memories, fears I had never made space for. They appeared in ordinary moments, while folding laundry, while making coffee, while sitting alone with no agenda. I wasn't enjoying freedom. I wasn't resting. I was confronting parts of myself I had never learned how to face. I realized I wasn't scared of being alone. I was scared of being present. Without something demanding my attention, there was nothing buffering me from my own thoughts. No deadlines to hide behind. No productivity to justify avoiding discomfort. Just me, my mind, and emotions I had been postponing for years. I wasn't failing at rest. I was learning that rest doesn't automatically bring peace. Sometimes it brings clarity, and clarity isn't always gentle. People kept telling me how lucky I was. "You're living the dream," they said. I smiled because it was easier than explaining the truth. I nodded along because I didn't have the words to describe what I was experiencing. On the outside, everything looked calm. But internally, I felt unanchored. I started wondering if something was wrong with me. Why wasn't I happier? Why didn't this feel like the relief I had imagined? Why did silence feel heavier than stress? That's when a difficult realization settled in. My calm had never really been calm. It had been exhausting. I had been so tired for so long that numbness felt like peace. Constant motion had dulled my awareness just enough to function. When the exhaustion faded, everything underneath it surfaced. And suddenly, I was faced with the work I had avoided, understanding myself without the cover of busyness. I don't look back at that decision with anger or shame. I look back at it with clarity. Stepping away didn't break me, but it did remove the protection I didn't realize I was relying on. It forced me to confront the difference between escape and healing. I learned that removing one source of stress doesn't automatically resolve what's been building quietly beneath it. Sometimes, change reveals more than it fixes. This story isn't about warning anyone not to leave their job or saying that choosing a different path is a mistake. It's about understanding what we're truly running from when we make those choices. Sometimes the regret isn't the decision itself. It's the belief that it would fix everything. It's expecting silence to do the work that only self-awareness can do. If you've ever felt lost once the noise stopped, or uneasy in the quiet you thought you wanted, you're not alone. That discomfort doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something inside you is asking to be acknowledged. And the real work doesn't begin when life gets louder or busier again. It begins when it gets quiet enough for you to finally hear yourself.